Hello, everyone. It is Jennie and Laurie of Astropath, and we're here today to talk about Cancer season. Before we jump into it, I want to say that our channel is going to be changing to some extent. We're going to be really focusing just on these videos that talk about mundane astrology, which is what's happening in current time. So we're really going to be focusing on that. We're not going to be doing the other kinds of videos anymore. Jennie and I are each going to develop a separate channel for more of our own perspective and our own things.
Mhm.
We will visit each other's channels. So once we get those underway, we'll share that information with you and you can follow us on those as well. The other thing is this is probably the last season video we're doing because we're going to be doing it month to month rather than Cancer season, Leo season, etc. Because what we've discovered is most people really look at it month to month because that's how our culture runs. So that's how we're going to be doing things going forward. Now, that's all the explanation you need. Please follow us, share our videos, and all the things. Subscribe. So now, without further chatter, you can find all the information about both of us below, but let's get talking about Cancer season.
Yes, let's do it. So what you will see is we're going to make a seasonal video right now, and then we are going to make another video for July. So you're going to get a little bit of repeat information, but that's just going to help you understand more about, what's going on because there's a ton of stuff going on right now. So let's just take it from the top. This starts on June 20th at 10:42 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So adjust your own calendar accordingly. And let's just talk about Cancer for a minute.
Hmm.
We've been talking about Cancer a lot, haven't we?
Mhm.
Jupiter just moved into Cancer, is a place where it likes to be, and now the Sun is moving into Cancer. And this is the cardinal water sign. And you can always think about Cancer, from my point of view, as being the kind of matriarchal sign. And it has this protective energy and it has this sensitive energy at the same time.
Mhm.
You can always think about the crab, the Cancer of the crab, because that has that shell on the outside, the protective layer, and then the soft belly on the inside, which represents that loving sensitivity. So that's Cancer in a nutshell. Lori, how do you think of Cancer?
Well, I always think that in our culture, we're taught that sensitivity is weakness, and Cancer shows us otherwise. Cancer is a cardinal sign, and it is a very, very strong sign that knows how to make things happen. And what Cancer really wants to make happen is security and protection, like you said. Yet Cancer is the cardinal water sign. When the sun moves into Cancer, that is the summer solstice. It's actually the beginning of summer. We feel like we've been in summer for a while, many of us at least. The sun's shining, it's warm, we feel like it's summer. But once the sun goes into Cancer, then we're officially in summer. Cancer is the first of the three summer signs. So, what else about Cancer? I have a daughter who has a son in Cancer. She taught me a lot about the strength of Cancer, I have to say. She
Yes.
really, that's where I really learned the strength of Cancer.
Mm, yeah. And part of it is just thinking about how important water is on our
Mhm.
planet, like to understand Cancer. And I think about Cancer as being like the wellspring. As the cardinal water sign, you think about cardinal as something that starts, initiates something, and then water is really what life has to gather around. I mean, without water, there's no life. So if you just take that on board, you really start to gather how important Cancer really is. You can think about it as a wellspring means whole villages will build around this little
Right.
spring, which, after the eons go by, becomes a major city. So just think about that. It's a starting point for where people can feel nourished, where people can get hydrated, where
Mhm.
people can do all the things they need to do with water, bathe, make sure that they can purify and have there's a cleansing element to that as well. You can even think about how a baby is grows in the amniotic fluid inside the womb. I mean, a baby starts in water, so we all start with water. So that really sends home that message very clearly.
Yeah. That's great, Jenny. I just love how you described all of that. It really is. It's such an important sign. And I think yeah, sensitivity is given little credit in our culture.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable. That's the irony.
Oh,
And I
yes.
think there's a lot about true courage is being able to show up with that vulnerability and to be fierce as well. And just, with standing in that vulnerability, not despite it.
Fierce vulnerability. That's a beautiful thing to think about.
Yeah.
Fierce vulnerability and
Yeah.
protection. And yeah, people think about mothering and the mother with cancer and nurturing. And you think about a mother of any species. If the baby is threatened in any way, you see that fierceness
Mhm.
of love, really. Cancer is here for the development of that level of vulnerability and love.
Mhm.
So wherever you have cancer in your chart, look at that. And we'll be talking about that area for each of the rising signs. But that is an area where you hold this level of deep sensitivity and the ability to tap into your own fierce vulnerability.
Yeah. And I just want to add one thing because sometimes I know for some people it might be, yeah, I don't know. It's a little triggering to think about cancer is like it's the mother. Well, what? I don't have kids. You can think of it as any creative project, anything you're giving birth to, and that whole feeling about it when you have this like seedling idea and how tender that seedling is, and you need to protect that seedling long enough so it can grow strong enough roots so that you can bring your idea out into the
Mm.
world. So it can be about children, but it absolutely doesn't have to be. So I just want to get that across because it's no, I mean, I don't have children and I have a strong cancer component, but I really feel that sense of mothering creative projects that I do. And also mothering myself through my own healing over many years, so there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but I just want to mention that.
Great, great,
Um,
thanks.
right, let's open up the chart. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. The chart of the solstice moment.
Okay. Yeah, I
Ah,
realize as you're saying this, I forgot to put summer solstice in but anyway.
well, that's all right. We know it's there.
Okay, well, this is the chart of the moment. So again, that's that 10:42 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Adjust that to your time zone. And right away you see the sun at 0, 0, 0 Cancer, and that is a moment that is at the Aries point, so called,
Mhm.
or I also think of it as like a cardinal point. It just indicates, yep, we're in a whole new season. It is now summer, and in the southern hemisphere, it is now winter officially, and that's just that.
Yeah. And yeah, the cardinal point is kind of thought of as a very public point.
Hmm.
So, pay attention to this moment in terms of, yeah, what's going on publicly
No.
as
Yeah,
well.
and there's a lot going on this chart. I'd like to kind of mention briefly. First of all, yes, you have the sun getting ready to conjunct Jupiter. That happens pretty early on in the season. That's really nice. I really like that. Jupiter is very pleased to be in Cancer. It's exalted, but it
Oops.
emphasizes the idea of how important it is to do Cancer things in some part of your life. That means think about what do you need to nourish, what do you need to nurture, what do you need to take care of. Think about what your emotional needs are, what self-parenting you need to do, self-care. Think about how to nurture those important relationships around you. And also, Cancer is the sign of one of the signs that indicates developing empathy.
Mm.
So think about that. Like, how do you be more empathetic? How can you approach people with more loving sensitivity, even if they're not even somebody you like? But just adopting that kind of ethos, I think, is what this
Yeah,
says.
and the other thing I just want to say is the first thing I noticed when I opened this chart is that the sun is coming so close to Jupiter. And if you have not listened to the video we made about Jupiter entering Cancer, I would really encourage you to do that because Cancer season is just this 1 month period of time while the sun is moving through there. But Jupiter is going to be in Cancer for a full year. So you
Hmm.
want to really listen to that video, and there will be a link in the show notes so that you can find that easily.
Yeah. What else do you want to talk about in this chart?
Oh my
What
goodness,
matters to
it's
you?
such an interesting chart, isn't it? And
Yeah.
the first thing that we have to notice, whether we want to or not, is the most difficult thing, which happens right at the very start of the season. And that is that we have a square. As soon as the sun moves in there, it forms a square aspect to that really tight conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. That conjunction, incidentally, is not going to be perfected until early 2026, but it is so close right now.
Yeah.
And that square is really a tension point.
Hmm.
It's a point where whatever is, there's this explosiveness, this yeah, Aries energy that is pushing against our desire to nurture and care. There's something that's really working against that we have to face and manage.
Hmm.
We can't
Yeah.
ignore it.
No, and I think it's interesting. I was really feeling this actually yesterday. I was having this thought. Just there's some way where we are just being totally activated, culturally, socially, individually, where these two planets have moved into wherever you have Aries, and this is an activation. This is a
Mhm.
switch turning on for all of us in some way. And it might feel very, I mean, it could feel confusing, it could feel really intense or kind of restrictive, or but at the
Angry.
same time, yeah, it can feel but no matter what, it's galvanizing.
Mhm.
And the message between the square here is yes, that's all happening. And don't lose touch with your own feelings.
Mhm.
Stay in touch with your intuition, stay in touch with your instincts, because they're going to really serve you well in the square. So that's what this is saying. Whenever you see a square, it's saying you respect both ends of that. Respect the Cancer, respect the Aries, find the way to respect both. You're not trying to pull one over the other.
Right.
You're trying to find out how to do both in a balanced way.
How to manage them. Yeah. And I would also just add, be prepared to protect.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of there's so many different ways you can look at these symbols because Saturn and Neptune are so different. Saturn structure, Neptune dissolving. Then Aries is this like very hot starting energy, and neither of those planets are particularly comfortable in Aries. So there's something uncomfortable, perhaps, that we're having to each uncover about ourselves. I think there's an individual process, and there's of course the world stage and
Mm.
this tension you can see playing out right now, certainly in the United States, but all across the world of this kind of power trying to push forwards, and this other part that is like no, we need to care for each other more, and these
Right.
two things are at odds with each other,
Yeah.
but each of us need to kind of take that on board and reckon with this within ourselves as well as on the
Yes.
world stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And
um
then
and
once
then
that little stress gets out of the way, not that it's a little stress, let's
Mhm.
make that clear. But once we kind of pass through that and kind of gather ourselves, this is how I think of it, is at that point we gather ourselves into the process of nurturing, protecting, caring for. And once we're able to do that, we have an awfully lot of support, don't we, Jenny? You can see all of the really lovely aspects that are being created. There is a sextile to Mars. There
Mhm.
is a sextile to the moon as soon as we move in here.
Mhm.
And those two are in a trine aspect. So there's
Yes.
really a way that we really have the opportunity to steady ourselves. Both of those sextiles are to planets that are in earth signs. So it's really about, okay, we can do this nurturing piece. We can steady ourselves. We don't have to let all of this spin us out.
Yes. Yeah. And I really like this little entry point, with the moon. Just such a nice tight sextile with the sun there. That's the
Hmm.
moment in time. I think what's also interesting is you have that going on, and then you also have the very dynamic sextile between Pluto and Saturn, Neptune. And it just
Right.
so there's a lot of potency and power in this chart on the one hand, and then there's this question on the other hand with those more personal planets about how do you help other people? How do you slow down to, be grounded? How do you make sure that you're not losing touch with the emotional content of what's going on as well at the same time?
Yeah.
So empowerment taken care of. I mean, this is an interesting juxtaposition of energies for sure.
Yeah. And the sextiles are, they're very different than a trine. They're not a gift, they're an opportunity. You really have to activate them. So it's really important that you activate your ability to tap into that nurturing. I was reading something. I don't know why this just popped into my head, and I'm gonna just bring it up. I was reading something about how to care for ourselves in this difficult, challenging time. And there was this whole idea about wherever you go, building tiny altars. Like, if you're on the beach, take some sticks and some shells and build a tiny, just as an altar to nurturance, to
Yeah.
care, to taking care, creating some tiny focus of beauty that someone else might see, and it might
Mm,
change someone's day. These tiny little efforts that we can
mm.
make. And I think of sextiles as often, especially with like a sextile that involves the moon, it's such a passing phase. It doesn't require a big thing. It requires something small, and
Mm.
something tiny can change everything.
Yeah, like it's kind of like just that simple decision to walk through the door. You don't know, you don't have to be responsible for what's on the other side of the door. You just have to decide to walk through it. That's how I think of those sextiles. And
Huh,
I
I
love what
like
you said
that.
about the little altar because that also brings to mind that that's a very tactile thing. Like you're out on a beach, you're playing with the rocks, like you're getting your hands on, on the earth, you're playing with the rocks, you're making this shape and you're playing kind of like a child, like building a
Yes.
sandcastle, I mean, and I think that that's so important. I think there's a strong message to, even with it is fierce Aries energy, but there's something about fire that always has a playful edge to it, to play, to dance. And I think that that's part of it. So I like that. I think what you just said actually summarizes quite beautifully
Yeah.
what we're talking about
And
this
you
season.
can you can do
Yeah.
some little thing like that anywhere. Anywhere you go for a walk. And you know, we've all had that experience of walking through the woods or walking wherever and seeing some tiny thing somebody's created, and how it just kind of like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a walk I do, up here in Vermont, about an hour away, where there's these little like painted stones somebody has put here and there, like little treasures. And you're like, what's that colorful thing? And it's this little painted
Yeah.
stone. So that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's a great,
Oh,
great little practice to do this month, I think. I think I'm going to take that on as a practice.
yeah, I like that. Well, there's more we can talk about. Do you want to talk about it by the calendar, or is there anything
Let's
else that you have to add?
let's go to the calendar. I
Yeah.
think I'm
Okay.
ready to do that. Let me clear
Okay.
this, and okay.
Yeah, because there's more things happening, but I think it's better broken down here. So, well, here's the calendar. As we've mentioned, the sun moves into Cancer that June 20th. And at that point, I just want to mention that we are in the very ends of the moon cycle. So we're in that sort of balsamic moon
Hmm.
phase. So that what that says is it kind of sets the stage for these first few days up until the new moon on the 25th to just remember that there's an internal process about a lot of these things. It's not to say you won't see them outside of yourself, but because it's a balsamic moon, you really want to take on board what does this mean for you personally. You want to kind of look under the hood of what's happening for you, even if it's big things. Just notice how you're handling it.
Hmm.
Um, but right, I mean, right away we had that Mars sextile Jupiter. I really like that. That's a nice yin, that's Virgo to Cancer and a
Hmm.
sextile. So that kind of sets you up to handle this probably most intense couple of aspects of the whole season, the sun squaring Saturn and Neptune before it conjuncts Jupiter. So that's kind of what those themes are we're just talking about, that bumping up against some kind of restriction, struggling with some sort of aggravation, or maybe feeling a lot of anger and forgetting for a moment that you also need to slow down and take care of yourself. It's, I don't know, but I think of that as being this internal experience of these frustrations, and you can't quite get a handle on it because it's also Neptune.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
if it comes up as anger, I just, I'm just thinking about how easy it is in relationships to let anger take over. And, we have to allow ourselves to feel that anger in order to, take care of ourselves and set our own boundaries and all that. It's not like we can take anger and stuff it somewhere. That's never the point. It's never needed. But before we open that anger into our relationships, I think it's just so important to remind ourselves that any conversation has to start with the understanding of what you're trying to create you
yes.
know and a conversation, unless it's a conversation that is this relationship is over, unless it's honestly that, your conversations always, even if it's an argument, the intention has to be to make connection, to develop understanding. And square aspects really push us to look at both sides. So, really coming at it with, okay, I've got this problem and I'm angry, but my intention ultimately is to connect. And
Mm.
really, really focusing on that. This is, after all, Cancer season.
Yes. And I like that how you said that, like that, the connection is the point, the figuring out
Yeah.
how to, be in a space to bond with people, to connect, to have that deeper level of connection. And I think that, there's a lot of just anger is a really important emotion. It's very galvanizing. There's a lot of things to be super outraged about right now. And that's important. But what the trick is with fire is learning how to be constructive with it, like learning how to let it happen. You absolutely don't want to restrict anger in the sense, I mean, you don't want to unleash on people, but you want to recognize your anger and feel it, because repressed anger is ultimately what partly creates illness,
Mhm.
and also can be incredibly destructive on your relationships. I like what you're saying. And this is that whole dance. How do you nourish? How can you be honest with your feelings, yet how can you nourish? How can you accept someone else's anger and be forgiving, yet also set boundaries?
Right.
Right. Like that's kind of the dance we're all trying to do, depending, wherever you're at in those. We're probably all doing both of those.
Yeah.
Probably all said things we don't mean, or we meant, but we didn't say very gracefully, right? And then just being like, oh shit, I
Yeah.
gotta
I mean,
address this.
it's
So
easy in the heat of the moment to forget that the conversation is really about connection. It's easy in the moment to think that the conversation is about, you being right.
right. Oh yeah, because there's like a righteousness that can happen with fire, with the
Right.
Aries or any of the
Right.
fires.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Like I'm right and you have to acknowledge that I'm right. Well, calm down and realize that really the purpose is not who's right and who's wrong. The purpose is to come back into connection.
yes. And I think that kind of lands us perfectly on where we are in this calendar, which is the new moon in Cancer is a great time to really kind of make that commitment to yourself that you're going to, keep that in mind, keep connection in mind, keep this idea of this very sort of rejuvenating, nourishing energy at hand. That's kind of what that new moon in Cancer, because the very next day, you have some very dynamic things happening. You've got two sextiles. They are yin sextiles. They're happening in earth and water signs. But Mercury sextile Uranus, I mean, that is a pretty jazzy contact. And Sun
Um,
sextile Mars also, there's a lot of energy in that.
there's a
Plus,
lot of energy in that. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of starts us off. All right, we're in a new moon now. Let's do it. And you kind of move into these Mercury trining Saturn and Neptune. So now what felt pretty restrictive a few days ago, now you start to see your way through. You start
Oh,
seeing the gift,
and
right? Of
not only that,
yeah.
Mercury moved into Leo.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
your whole ability to use your voice opens in a very fiery new way.
Yeah, and so this is like the mental activation. Like I feel like we talked about activation a bit in the beginning with fire so activating. We're all being activated. So at this point, what is being activated? That's a gift, and you can really feel that light up. And then Mercury opposes Pluto. So that's sort of, I mean, well, actually, Lori, what does that suggest to you? What does Mercury oppose Pluto
Oh,
do?
well, people like to think about oppositions as big stress points, and they are, but the the offering of the stress of an opposition is awareness.
Yeah.
And there's a way I think of this opposition as really, really the ability to understand the power of your voice.
Mm. Yes.
Right? The power, Mercury is in Leo now. Pluto is in Aquarius. Leo is so personal, and Aquarius is so much about the collective, the humanitarian, so it's like your individual personal voice has an impact. There's a huge piece here, I think, that is so important for us in today's fractured
Yeah. Well,
political environment that I think this is really about understanding the power of your voice. What do you think?
well, I love that you're saying it like that because yes, I think that this is a symbol for this is a really important time to speak, as truthfully as you know how. And when I say truthfully, I mean I guess I really mean honestly, like to really be clear about what is best you know, what's going on for you. And I don't mean you don't have to be ruthless, which this could come out as ruthless.
Mhm.
But you can be very clear about getting to the bottom of certain issues with this. And it's funny because I was thinking about a very potent yoga teacher I know is an older guy who's been doing this a long time, and he's got Mercury opposed Pluto in his natal chart. And he's just somebody who could speak to these deep
Mm,
issues like no one else. Like he's the one who can sort of casually drop in a mention of death in your yoga class, and
mm,
everybody goes, mm-hmm, yep. Like nobody's freaked out because he knows how to handle that power, and that's what this
mhm,
is to me is
Oh, that's great.
recognizing that. So
Great.
yeah, yeah. So then the moon is continuing to build in light. So we come to the first quarter Libra moon, which kind of puts the intellect in a funny position with the emotions. This is a time to maybe be able to verbalize through Libra in a kind way,
Mm,
like some of the feelings that you're having. This might feel at odds with each other, but that's the nature of the first quarter moon. So,
mm. Yeah,
there we go.
yeah.
And then on we go.
And then on we go. What happens on that? Okay, so that is July 4th.
Mhm.
We have Venus conjunct Uranus. And then Venus goes into Gemini immediately. It's like Venus comes along. Uranus is right at the very last degree, about to move into Gemini as well. So they come together right before they step into Gemini. Isn't that interesting? There's
Yeah.
some like real wake up, pay attention to what your deepest values are. You've got to get really, really clear here about your values, what is really important to you. And then as Venus enters Gemini, you're ready to talk about it. And when Uranus moves in there in a few days, you'll really be talking about it. But
No.
that's for a few days later, right? And then
Yes.
Neptune goes retrograde.
Yeah. Yeah, on July 4th, in the very idealistic United States of America's birthday holiday, at a time when there's just a grand division going on in this country. So I think that's fascinating. I've been thinking about that for a while. Just the, Neptune sort of saying, all right, we've got to go inwards and just demanding an inward turn, an inward reckoning of what is the ideal, what's the vision, what is I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could spin off into that, but nonetheless, just take note of that. So that is a dynamic day with a
Yeah.
kind of a mixed signature of, hey, let's move forwards. And then, yeah, but underneath that, there's a need to revisit.
There's a need
Um,
to revisit some level of, yeah, what your idealism is, there could be some real spiritual gifts that you need to go back for.
And I'm just going to be honest here too, it can just be the recognition of suffering, the
Yeah.
suffering that's happening all around us. So Neptune has many, many, many different levels. And they all those things we just said, there's dreams, there's fantasies, there's transcendence, there's other things in there too. But I think we just gave you a few things to think about.
Yeah, I think with
Yeah.
yeah, with Neptune retrograde, we're all going to need a little time on the meditation cushion.
I know.
Even if we're not meditators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you come to that really, I think on the 6th there, you have Venus sextiling Saturn and Neptune. So
Oh.
that now what was so difficult at the beginning that felt restrictive, then felt like a gift, now becomes this opportunity to connect with somebody, to connect maybe more on the intellectual level here, to kind of go with our Cancer theme of connecting emotionally. Now with Venus and Gemini and sextiling these two planets, this is a great time to kind of share ideas, to share more about what is on your mind with this Aries energy, what has been activated in you that you are now ready to really talk about
Mm.
with those close to you and other people in your immediate environment. So there's something with that. And then you have Uranus goes into Gemini, which is
I think that,
huge.
yeah, that's the most significant thing. And did we make a video about that already? Yes.
No, but we're going, we're
We are going to.
going to
Okay.
be doing this.
So
Yep.
watch for that because this is a really important, important thing. Uranus will stay in Gemini for, I'm not sure how many years, 7, 8 years, something like that.
Yes. No, that's right. That's about what a cycle is.
And Uranus is the planet of awakening. So wherever Gemini is in your chart is going to be really activated in a new way as Uranus steps in there. It's going to be like wake up time. You put
Yes.
your fingers in a light socket and nothing ever looks the same again.
Yeah, and then I mean, yeah, that's going to be a big game changer. We'll talk more about those in individual impacts
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And then Venus trines Pluto. So again, you have that Pluto thing, that need to reckon with the deeper layers. But here it's a trine. Mercury had the opposition to Pluto. Venus has a trine to Pluto. So that's just it's a
Mhm.
funny little repeat pattern there. But the trine really is the gift of empowerment that comes from speaking your mind.
Mhm.
I think that's
Yeah. Really authentically bringing your values to the table in whatever way.
yeah, and just having
You
it
can't
flow.
hide it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, open that door.
And so I mean that's kind of the lead into the full moon. See, then you have this full moon in Capricorn, Capricorn being the opposite sign. We'll talk more about that in our monthly video as well. But that's just kind of that keynote of Capricorn being the other yin cardinal sign, sort of going, okay, we need to balance this. We need to check in about your degree of integrity and how are you working with these emotions and are you holding yourself accountable for working to connect with other people. There's some questions around there that full moon, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and then it's like you're kind of, there isn't a whole lot, there's a few little things after that, but after that things kind of like, for the waning half of the moon cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the waning half of the moon cycle, because then Saturn stations retrograde on the 13th,
Yeah.
which kind of, it isn't on here, but somewhere in this time period you have the closest that Saturn and Neptune are going to get until their actual conjunction in February of 2026.
Yeah, they get
Um,
so,
they're
so
so close.
close.
They're within 13 minutes of each other, which is so damn close.
Yeah.
But it doesn't officially perfect until
Until
then.
next February, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
And then you've got your last quarter moon in Aries.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. Just another little ping about Cancer Aries themes, just a little reminder shot across the bow.
Mhm.
What do you need to let go of? What anger do you need to let go of? Might be some of that. What hot energy do you need to release a little bit? And then we kind of have the final thing.
Mercury.
So Mercury also stations retrograde. So this kind of shows us the inward, the little bit of this inward flavor at this point. Now three planets very close to each other, turning retrograde.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say about that Mercury retrograde is, so many people still get all nervous when they see Mercury's about to go retrograde, and oh my God, Mercury's retrograde, everything's going to go wrong. And I love Mercury retrograde. I look forward to it. When I see it on the calendar, I'm like, phew. It's sort of, for me, it really represents a period of time of getting caught up on all the things that feel like they're overwhelming, all the projects and paperwork and all the stuff that has not gotten completed. So I always take some time, a week or so ahead, or even a few days ahead, and make a list of everything that's undone and really focus on that for the 3 weeks that Mercury is retrograde. Don't take on anything new. It's as simple as that. It can be some of the most, yeah, the most accomplishment in my life happens while Mercury is retrograde.
No, I agree with you. Like for me personally too, where that lands, it's a perfect time for me to, I'm gonna be traveling before that, and I'm gonna be coming home, and it really gives me this great like regroup time because I'm gonna be doing a little bit of a somewhat of a relaunch of my business around that
Mm,
time. Like, and
mhm,
that's gonna be my lead in to kind of getting
mhm.
some things lined up. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's a pretty
Including your new YouTube channel.
I yes, new YouTube channel, like there's a litany I'm gonna be that's when I'm gonna put out really be in earnest, looking for people to sign up for my classes. All
Mm,
my classes will be on my website by then, so et cetera,
awesome.
et cetera. So I'm looking forward to that. Um and then you have that little Mercury retrograde sextile Venus. I mean, that, I don't know. I think that's a little opportunity to align your voice with your values, something simple like that. Like go ahead and talk about what's on your mind. Talk about your Mercury retrograde process.
And
Uh,
then, yay, the sun enters Leo.
for us Leos, yes. So very happy about that when the sun goes into Leo. So that's in a nutshell is the month. There's a different themes going on here, but just the big one is that connection piece, which I think we will start talking about the impacts. Are you ready for the individuals?
I think so. Let's move right into it.
All right.
Hmm.
Oh,
I guess I
so we
should
got
get
some,
rid of all of those
yeah.
little
All
symbols there.
right, we have to check in.
Clear all that out. Okay, we're set
All
now.
right. Okay, thank you, Lori. Okay, so those of you with Aries rising, you have Cancer in the fourth house. And so when the sun moves into Cancer on June 20th, it is really illuminating the connections with your family. This is your home life. The fourth house refers to everything to do with home. So your own deep inner roots, the people you live with, the space that you live in. There's a lot of things here. There's the ancestry. There's a lot of broad things you can think about, but just take away foundation. This is the time to nourish your foundation. That's what this Cancer season is about. That's what you will be brought back to time and time again throughout this season as the sun makes its travels through there. Now, you can't deny the fact that there is also that intense square in the beginning to Aries planets. So for you, Aries rising, that represents some sort of restriction you've encountered about your sense of self, or the image that you project. There's something here that you're not quite sure about with Saturn and Neptune, both in Aries. That can really represent a conundrum of your ideals versus your desire to take action, yet you feel there's some kind of boundary in the way or some kind of pressure. So that's the beginning of the season. As the season progresses, you will start seeing this as a way to offer you some stability. It'll start becoming a gift of the ability to set some boundaries, perhaps, or really understand your ideals better. And by the time you get to the end of the season, there's going to be a real opportunity to use that hot Aries energy as a way to really like connect with your people,
Mm.
which goes really nicely with the whole Cancer season pressure to connect with people. So you'll be connecting with people emotionally, and if you use that other aspect well, intellectually, you really be able to do both, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah.
And then, Lori, what else is going on that really is going to impact
Well,
us?
I just, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about people with Aries rising are really adjusting to a renewed understanding of their own strength. I think
Oh,
there's,
yeah.
and it's difficult. It's not clear at this point, and it's challenging, but they are adjusting to a new understanding of themselves. And and this challenge early in the month really kind of is involved in, who am I now and what is my responsibility around being fiercely vulnerable in my family or in my home in some way. And so, kind of like that's that early in the season struggle. And then as we get deeper into the season, there's really that idea of Uranus moving into Gemini and your voice really waking up to your own ability to open your voice.
Mm,
What do you have to say?
nice.
And that's going to just play in with who am I? What do I have to say? How vulnerable can I be in this family unit? And, with that new moon on what, the 25th, plant a seed for fierce vulnerability within your home or family. Build those little tiny altars that we talked about at the beginning around your home. Find ways to be creative with that.
I like that.
That's
Great. That's great.
lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Let's move on to Taurus rising.
So, for those of you who have Taurus rising, this Cancer season, the focus is in your third house. So, let's get clear. Third house is your voice. It also relates to issues with siblings, neighbors, your neighborhood. For those of you with Taurus rising, this area is an area where you are very sensitive. You're very sensitive about how people perceive your voice, probably. You're probably really sensitive to those relationships with those people that you didn't necessarily choose in your life, but there they are, your siblings, your neighbors. So there's really a need to focus in and find your own tenderness in that area. At the beginning of this season, as we talked about earlier, we come in to this season with a struggle, and the struggle is that there's a part of you that has relatively recently been really changing your understanding of your own deepest hidden unconscious patterns.
Mm,
And as that understanding is, you're a little confused about it probably, and you might even be a little angry about what you're seeing and what you're beginning to understand, but it's not clear. And it can really set up like, oh, well, how vulnerable do I want to be with my voice? Because I'm not really fully comfortable with this behind the scenes part of myself right now. So,
mm,
sit with that, work with that.
mhm.
It will get clear eventually. And as the season moves along, we move into a lot of the easier part of this period of time. And yeah, what do you want to add, Jenny?
No, I think you're, yeah, going in the, agree. Like it seems like what at first could be quite difficult and feel restrictive and feel, I don't know, very inward and personal will start to open up and flow. It'll flow into your mindset, and then there'll be more of an opportunity. Exactly. I mean, just to see how that then unfolds in your relationship. So I like that. I like thinking about the season that way. That it's this kind of like this opening that can happen. And furthermore, Uranus is going into Gemini. And for those of you with Taurus rising, that represents a huge wake up as far as your resources. That might be something new that comes to light about money or begins to come to light. It can also be just your values and value system, including the way that you see yourself,
Mhm.
the way you value yourself and your self esteem. So there's a new energy coming into that part of your life that really is playing into this other storyline that really is allowing you to kind of give yourself a new way to think about yourself, really, because it's Gemini. So there's something about that that's going to allow you to be more tender and nourishing in the way you communicate. Like if there's something going on with siblings, you're thinking about how to nourish those connections, but also making sure you're taking care of you
Mhm.
in those connections. So it's not just, well, you better make good with your siblings. Might not be the case. But it is about making sure that you're doing self-care, and then from there using your intuition to kind of see
Mhm.
how do you want to handle that. So I think I like this picture together. That's a pretty clear picture, I think, for Sun Cancer. I hope you agree, those of you who are watching this.
Yeah, leave us a
Yeah.
note.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love for people, when you're listening to this, leave us a note. Tell us how you're experiencing this. We would love to hear, and we try really hard to respond to every message.
That's right. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so those of you who have Gemini rising, for Gemini rising people, the sun going into Cancer illuminates your second house. It puts that warm, shiny, sunny light into the second house. Now, the second house is not always the most comfortable house because it is a place that often has to do with our self-esteem. It has to do with our money. And if you have never had an argument about money, then I don't know who you are. So money's always a little bit of an issue. There's the second house refers to our resources. It's sort of like the first extension of the self. Like, oh, I have a body, I have resources, I have value, I have something to offer. So for Gemini rising people, that's what comes up during Cancer season. And it really refers to this really a lot of support to nourish yourself, to take care of you, to really reflect on what is self-care, and then further, what is self-love? Like, how do I love myself regardless of all my BS? And like self-love can be very tricky. So, and this is a tender area for those of you at Gemini rising. So take this to heart and
Mm.
think about how you can really, make yourself a cup of tea. Like take yourself down to walk by the river. I mean, you can even think about yourself as if you're your own best friend. That
Mm.
is a great way to think about it. So anyway, that's where Cancer season is landing. Now, right in the beginning of the season, that might feel difficult because there's some stress around those planets that are in Aries. So Saturn and Neptune have gone into your 11th house of groups. So there might be a way that you feel somehow restricted or confused or not quite sure about what's going on with the group situation early on. It's making you feel kind of yucky about yourself, perhaps. There's some kind of tension. Maybe there's some kind of anger that somebody is pissing you off and you're in a very public environment. So that's the beginning of it. But rest assured that as the season unfolds, whatever felt stressful and restricting will start to feel like a source of stability, will start to feel like something that you can actually kind of deal with. Might not be crystal clear, but you're starting to go okay as the season wears on. And then as we get even closer towards the end of the season, you'll see how that really supports your relationships. And
Mm.
so, what might feel sticky and uncomfortable early on, promises according to Cancer season astrology to kind of settle down and become something you can get a handle on.
Mm.
And then there's other stuff going on too. So, but I will leave that to you, Lori.
Well, I just keep thinking about, this um this piece about community
Mm,
and how this area, for those of you with Gemini rising, this area has just recently been really coming into focus, into real dynamic focus. And you may, like Jenny said, there's something in those groups or in that community that you're struggling with. And a lot of it may be just your own challenge and difficulty in receiving support from community. There may be a real challenge to you there, like your community wants to support you, and yet there's some way in which you have to really step back and learn to care for yourself and accept the resources that are given to you. So there's a real challenge in that. But and you also want to think about that new moon on the 25th of June, which is happening, of course, in Cancer. Think about that. Think about planting your seed there. I want to remind you that that new moon on the 25th, you want to really focus on doing some sort of a ritual to plant a seed to grow your finances, your self-worth, whatever it is, so that you can receive support from your community. And
nice.
then the big wake up call, the big wake up call, which we will be talking about in our next video about Uranus moving into Gemini, is huge for you. Those of you with Gemini rising, you are about to get a blast of illumination and wake up energy on who you are.
Mhm.
That's really going to be big. So make sure you listen to that video when we bring it out. Make sure you're subscribed and you get notifications. So when that video comes out, you have the opportunity to
Yeah.
listen to it.
So overall, I was just thinking with the Gemini person, this is really an opportunity perhaps to stand your ground, With authority figures. I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking
Mm.
is like, because Saturn can be authority figures, and you're really learning how to take care of you in the face of that. And like with authority figures, it's like, you have
Interesting.
to respect the authority, right? I mean, that's just what's going on. But it doesn't mean you have to, give up every last shred of autonomy and quail, in front of someone. This is like, how do you stand your ground, nourish yourself, and do this in a way that commands respect, no
Hmm.
matter what your position is.
Interesting.
So anyway, all righty. That's fabulous. Let's move
That's
on.
fabulous. Let's move on. So, those
Cancer
of
rising.
you with Cancer rising, I know a few people with Cancer rising, I believe. So with Cancer rising, this is a very, very, very personal season. Celebrate yourself. Celebrate yourself. Really, your focus, the focus of Cancer season is on the most personal part of who you are, your personality. People with Cancer rising, tend to be very nurturing, protective people in general. So there's a focus on that. Um, and yet, as we start this season, there's that challenge that we have been talking about is coming from your understanding about your career or your social reputation. There's some way in which um, I don't know, maybe you don't feel quite ready. You don't feel there's just a struggle there where you're not clear, and yet you're trying really hard to face reality and do the work and effort to get clear. And there may be a lot of frustration in that. So, that's not going to last too long. You're going to work your way through that. And the rest of this season is an awfully lot easier. And I'm going to let you take over, Jenny. You know this one.
Yeah, well, I know this is me, coach. Anyway, but I do think it's interesting because I keep thinking about that Aries energy as being an activation for everybody. And so for those of you of Cancer rising, that activation is coming through your work life or your most public life, and you may feel it very publicly. And it is kind of also saying, as a Cancer rising person, like keep getting in touch with your intuition, like go further into the connection with your intuition, because with Cancer rising, you have that ability to walk around with that sort of feeling detector on. And of course, there's a balance of not wanting to overdo the vulnerability, but there is a real opportunity here because, like we're saying, it starts out as pressure, but then as the season moves on, it turns into more of a gift. You start seeing how that activation, even if you're not crystal clear about everything that it means, but you see how that activation is starting to ripple into your life.
Hmm.
And really, Cancer Rising is an interesting one because the first house and the 10th house are the two most powerful houses
Hmm.
in the whole thing here. So this is a potent time for those of you with this. And furthermore, Uranus is now going to move into Gemini. And
Wow.
in a Cancer rising person, you are waking up on a deep psychic level
Hmm.
that hasn't happened to you before. This is something really new that you are getting to see, so I mean, unless you're very old, it could be a
Yeah,
Uranus return.
yeah,
But anyway,
absolutely.
I think this is interesting. This is waking up your insight. And I think that goes really well with the intuition. It kind of brings in this deeper level of understanding that you are starting to be gifted with. And I really like that. This is a
Yeah.
very dynamic um, Sun and Cancer season for you with Cancer rising. So,
Yeah, I was thinking about it, that activation of Saturn and Neptune up there. I was thinking about that as you were talking and thinking about, in your career or social reputation, the combination of facing reality and doing the work along with welcoming the intuition. And that's pretty powerful if you can bring those two together. And
yes.
at this beginning of Cancer season, really doing what it takes to align yourself with that activation. And
Mm.
on the 25th of June, at the new moon, do some sort of a ritual, plant a seed to really welcome that new way of seeing and understanding yourself.
Yeah. And just really staying connected with your your emotions, your feelings, your intuition, those deeper layers of things. And this is a wake up, sort of like planet wide. But those of you Cancer rising, this is very personal
I
for this.
love that. That's
So
great for you, Jenny.
yeah, I'll get on it. All right.
Get on it.
All right, let's move on to those of you with Leo rising. So, Leo rising, the sun going into Cancer is interesting. It lights up your 12th house. And I can't help but think that this is like Leo rising before Leo season, you know? So, first, Leo rising has to go through that like wake up of the intuition that the sun going into the 12th house brings. So, this is an opportunity, I think, to unearth more about who you are as an emotional being. What are the feelings that tend to be more buried or hidden from plain sight? I think the sun entering into here allows you to see them better, more clearly than you normally can. So I like that. So that's the first bit. And, take some time here to think about what feels like therapy to you in a positive way.
Mm,
What feels deeply rejuvenating and therapeutic? And that's what you want to make sure you spend some time doing during this Cancer
mm,
season.
mm,
Whatever that is. I mean, if it's like, for me, it's something like, paddleboarding and like floating in the
mm.
water and being in the middle of a pond and like just you floating on the water. I mean, it's incredibly nourishing. And so you might have an equivalent of that. Maybe it's, yoga classes, or maybe, I mean, it could be any number of things. I hope it's something out in nature. But anyway, get clear about what that is, especially in the beginning of the season where it feels a bit tense. We have those aspects to Aries early on in the season that can feel, oh, just frustrating. You might be somebody who feels very frustrated about what's going on in the world right now because you have that Aries, Saturn and Neptune and Aries in your ninth house. So that's your worldview, your philosophy, and your ability to think critically. There's something being stirred up there, and it might feel both confusing and frustrating, and you might feel restricted in some way. There's some clamping down that's happening in that area early on. And the trick is to just really look at that and keep staying connected with those deeper layers of your inner self. And that's going to help you get through that first rocky bit of the season. And then that very same aspect, or not aspect, but the same configuration of those two planets in Aries is going to get a little easier to handle as the season goes on. So, what first starts out as a feeling of restriction, repression, later may become an easy source of stabilizing, an easy source of boundaries,
Yeah.
or maybe a little more of an excitement about how to work with what's happening in the world in a different way. And by the time you reach the end of the season, I mean, it's basically just going to be an opportunity to get into a clearer alignment with some of your social groups. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, there's more stuff going on, but I will digress, Lori.
Well, I'm just thinking about, you're really in a position, those people with Leo rising, you're really in a position where you're just really getting some clarity around what your worldview is, whatever that means, and it could mean, big picture politics stuff, or it might be something way more personal for you. But your worldview, your understanding, your perspective on the world, you're really getting clear about. And when Uranus moves into Gemini,
Mhm.
I don't remember the date of that, but when that happens, there's really a wake up around the community that you can allow to support you to these changes, this change in understanding of your worldview. And I also want to bring you back to the new moon that happens on June 25th and remind you to plant a seed for the tenderness, the fierce tenderness, planting a seed for fierce tenderness of your own inner processes.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, all in all those things together, for those of you Leo rising, it's not happening in fairly public places. Everything's above the horizon line. I mean, the 12th house is your deeper inner processes, but it's all about how you relate to the collective. So all of those things together, this is a pretty empowering time for Leo rising to engage with the outer world, engage with the social world of your own social life. And
Yeah, and get ready to find that community or create it because there is going to be some big wake up around the necessity for community.
yes. So, okay. carrying on. Those of you with
Carrying on.
Virgo rising.
Those of you with Virgo rising, Cancer season occurs in your 11th house. The 11th house, I basically think of it as the community that supports you to your desires. So that's, you can think of that as, there's so many ways we can think of community. What does community mean to you? If you have Virgo rising, you're really sensitive to community. You really need to find community or create community that supports you. It's really a place where you have a lot of tenderness and, that tender fierceness and that need to be fiercely vulnerable within community is really important to you if you have Virgo rising. So, first of all, remember that on the 25th is the new moon. You want to plant a seed for the development of this deep, powerful community that can support you. But we want to think about the beginning of this Cancer season. When we come into it, there is a stress. There is a way in which you are just adjusting or attempting to adjust to some relatively recent changes that are creating this activation and this. Um, it looks like a difficulty right here at the beginning of this season. It looks like a real difficulty with how you navigate the differences between yourself and maybe the individuals within that community. But there's some way that you are realizing that you need to set different kinds of boundaries than you have in the past, or there's some way that you have to navigate these deep places that can be very uncomfortable. So that's where the challenge comes in early on in the season.
Mhm.
And then, as you work through this and the planets keep moving, this becomes a source of strength and things are about to change. I'm going to let you go on from there, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really nice flow with the season, as Lori's
Really
really
is.
led us nicely into where there's kind of this sort of bump up against something early on, and you've already covered really well. But that very same thing that early on can feel restrictive and confusing and problematic, as you work through things, it becomes a lot easier. It really opens up the gates for you with the way that the things that you sense about other people. You're able to tap more into compassion as the season goes on, and really let that impact your relationships in a really good way. So I think that ultimately what starts out as difficult ends up being supportive.
Mhm.
You'll please leave us comments to let us know if that's even remotely true for you. Hopefully it is. But the
It
other
certainly
thing,
makes sense for me, I'll tell you. As a
I know,
Virgo rising, it's like,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and just, and the idea that as you work with these energies, you're not just sitting like a lump on a log. You're listening to this video and you're working with these energies and you're wondering what this is. And and you're an agent of change here too. So it's part of it is how you receive it and work with it. And to that end, Uranus is also moving into Gemini. So those of you with Virgo rising, wow, you're getting there's a big shift coming your way that has to do with your public reputation, perhaps your professional life. There's some insight coming your way. There's some kind of recharge or just brand new awakening to something you hadn't really thought of before. And I'm very excited for you, Lori, as to what that is. Because that's really dynamic. So sort of like saying the more you open up to the nourishment of your community, allow yourself to be supported, the more you work with, how to set the right kinds of boundaries, with other people that serve you well and actually serve your relationships well. The more you're preparing yourself for this really dynamic shift and that you're going to be able to handle that shift in the public place represented by Uranus with a good deal of grace, by kind of managing what happens early on in the season and then opening to the flow that's available. So,
Awesome.
yeah, moral of
I'm
the story is
excited.
get open. Yeah, be open to your
Yeah.
community,
Yeah,
accept the support. Cool. I love it. I
I
like
do
this.
too. I'm excited.
Okay, let's move on.
Let's do that.
All right, so those of you who have Libra rising, that means that you have Cancer on the 10th house cusp. through whole sign houses. So if you are, living your little Libra life, what this is really illuminating is something to do with your most public aspect of your life, your public persona. So for a lot of folks, this is a profession. This is a place where you've invested a lot of time and energy into some kind of social contribution. It could also just be the most social place in your life where you are seen by the greatest number of people. But in any case, that's what's being lit up. And it's really lighting up this very nourishing, nurturing, empathetic part of you potentially. So this is a time to really tune into that and maybe even consider like your work relationships. If you do have a professional life, what are those relationships like? Are they supportive? Are they nourishing? Is there a way that you can turn towards them and find a greater sense of connectedness? Those are some of the questions being posed to you during Cancer season. And Lori's been reminding me to mention the new moon here. So at the new moon on June 25th, really plant the seed for how you want to take care of yourself in this area of your life, how you want to try to get into a deeper state of connection with those around you who are really your associates and your colleagues and so on. So that's kind of that piece. Now, in the meantime, we do have those two heavy hitters, Saturn and Neptune in Aries, recently having moved into your seventh house. This is really lighting up the partnership place of your life. And there's some way that this feels at odds with whatever it is that you want to do in that more public place where the sun is. And at first, this can feel pretty stressful. There might be some way that you feel confused or befuddled or restricted by somehow the way you think about partnerships or by an actual partner that at first just feels really annoying and frustrating and at odds with each other. But as the season moves on, it seems that that will start to settle and become more of a source of, dare I say, joy and enthusiasm, and even can make some of those relationships really be more spicy and fun and really engaging. So that's kind of what we're seeing. But anyway, Laurie, what would you like to add to this Libra rising picture?
Well, it's so funny because I know so many people with Libra rising that are or were nurses in their lives. I
Huh.
always think that's funny.
Yeah,
Nurses or childcare workers. There's so
totally.
many of them with that cancer at the top of the chart. So, you can see that their outward expression of their lives had so much to do with fierce protection and all of that kind of thing. And yeah, there's some way in which relationship or the plans or the ideas around relationship, you're learning a lot in that area. You need to be facing reality and paying attention to your intuition, and there's some struggle there, but you know, that struggle's going to pass. And like Jenny's already said, I'm just sort of repeating everything she said, but there's some way that that is going to really shift and become more supportive. But along with all of this, the other piece that's really like waking you up is with Uranus moving into Gemini, and we will be making a video about that shift because it is so crucially important. There'll be a link below where you can find that video once we make it. Make sure you're subscribed and hit notifications so you'll get a notice about it. But when Uranus moves in there during this season, there is just a wake up that's going to be happening around your worldview. There's something about your wider perspective of the world that you have not understood until this point that's going to really probably catch you by surprise.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. It startled me. So it's
I
going to
caught you by
probably,
surprise.
it
Sorry.
caught me by surprise. Absolutely. My perspective was caught by
Yeah,
surprise.
sorry.
So, really, and Uranus is going to be in there for many years. So this is really the beginning of a big change around your worldview that could involve a new study or travel or whatever, a new understanding of where you find yourself culturally.
Yeah. No, this one I like. When you think about all that together, it really is an opportunity to explore relationships on a new level. It's kind
Uh-huh.
of, I don't know, it says something about that, how you really want to nurture those. And some of those really close relationships might be even your work relationships. You never know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you, Lori. That was good. Sorry.
Great.
All right.
Moving on.
Scorpio rising.
Oh, this is me. I get to start talking. I got confused for a moment.
Yeah.
All right. So if you have Scorpio rising, Cancer season, it falls in your ninth house. This is an area where you hold a lot of sensitivity. The ninth house is your worldview, your larger perspective on, your understanding of bigger world issues. Really, the ninth house is about it's our worldview, but it's our worldview that is developed through our experiences, the experiences of travel, of education, of encountering other viewpoints. So all of those experiences, we take if you've got Scorpio rising, you take all of that information in on a deeply sensitive manner, and you may be, fiercely protective of your own understanding. So that's kind of where the focus is during this period of time. At the beginning of Cancer season, there is a challenge to that. There is a challenge that comes from somehow this new development that's happening in your understanding of your day-to-day routines.
Mm.
It's interesting to think about how your day-to-day routines impact your worldview. There's a bit of a conflict here. There's some way in which you're really, there's a lot of dynamic change energy happening in your day-to-day routines. And that is causing some upheaval and frustration around your worldview. You probably know exactly what we're talking about here because you're living it, right?
Mhm.
So, in the midst of that struggle, just, work with it. Pay attention to it. Don't shut it out. Pay attention to it and be sure that on the 25th at the new moon, you plant a seed for finding a real tenderness in your perspective. Plant a seed to develop compassion as a primary part of what your worldview is.
Mm.
So, work with that, and your day-to-day routines are really going to become a source of great strength
Mm.
over the coming period of time. And yet, in the midst of all of this, Uranus's movement is going to start a whole new um, wake-up call. And I'm going to turn that part over and let Jenny talk about it because I need a drink of water.
Yeah, I was also reflecting when you're talking about the tension between the sixth house and the ninth house here. It's a little bit like it's sort of the tension of the schedule. Like, schedule feels restrictive, right? Schedule feels like it's too heavy, it's too rigid. But as the season goes on, you start seeing how your schedule and the way you set your routines can actually be this
Hmm.
incredibly liberating experience, right? That allows you, like, you have the skeleton that you can fill with the content. And so once you stop battling the, father time, and going, oh, actually scheduling can be super helpful because it's really just guidelines. And I think that, as you face this, and Lori said it very well, like as you kind of turn towards this and, make this effort to, like, how do I want to be more connected as part of my worldview? And you ask these questions, you can start really looking at how your schedule can support that. And I think that's how I see that. And I see that getting a little bit easier as you kind of, sort of embrace it as the season goes on. And then once Gemini moves in, I'm sorry, Uranus moves into Gemini, not Gemini moves into Uranus. Now it sounds a little naughty, so I'll put it back on track. But for you, that's going into your eighth house. So it's awakening you to something about the way you handle shared resources with other people.
Hmm.
Now, sometimes this can be really intense. That can be that battle over money that you have with your spouse, and those places where you bump into the sort of more shadow material of the other person. And with Uranus going here, there's a real insight coming into you about this. I mean, this is maybe you learning more about, you really are tapped in and you have the ability to be pretty objective when it comes to the skill set around setting boundaries and handling this difficulty of shared resources with other people. So that, I don't know, that's part of the narrative here. What do you have to add?
I just, you said something about something sounding naughty, and now all my mind can think about is, you talked about the waking up, the struggle in dealing with partners' resources. I'm thinking about the struggle around sexuality and
Yeah.
how the routine, the schedule might help.
Yeah.
Anyway, my mind just went into
Yes.
all of that because
My
that
fault.
eighth house is all the places where we bump into other people's values. And that really can come out in ways of shared money, shared resources, where we share ourselves physically through sexuality is a big part of that eighth house. So, and the other thing of that eighth house is setting boundaries. And clearly, when you're sharing resources of any of these types, sexuality, money, whatever, when you're sharing resources, you have to know how to set boundaries. And Uranus moving into that house, be sure to,
Mm.
click notifications so that you get the video that we're going to make about Uranus moving into Gemini. This is going to be really important to wake you up around how you do that sharing and how you set boundaries that really work for you.
Yeah, and secret tip, it involves knowing yourself pretty darn well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh,
Boundaries is a fascinating, fascinating piece of human life
no, it is.
and relationships.
Yes. All right. Carrying on.
Carry on.
All right. We are moving to Sagittarius rising. So, those of you with Sagittarius rising, this Cancer season is illuminating your eighth house. The eighth house is an area that is often hard to get a glimpse of. There's a little bit of a hidden component to it. There's sort of maybe even some secrets that are stashed away in the eighth house. And so, having the sun come here every Cancer season, it's interesting because for you, what it illuminates is the way you handle other people's stuff. So this is the place where you have to share resources with someone else. You have to deal with their value system in order to connect on a deeper level. Or Laurie was just bringing up in the previous one that this could also be sexuality, where this is where you need to understand how you are working with that. So all of those things together imply that you need to have some understanding of boundaries. And that means some understanding of where you end and the other person involved here begins.
Mhm.
And so every Cancer season really illuminates this conundrum for you. And really meeting this with, a self-care attitude, with the desire to connect with other
Mhm.
people, with a loving sensitivity, those things are going to really help you here because it is a deeper understanding of you and your own emotions. So that's really what's going on here during Cancer season. And this year might be interesting because now we have those squares to
Mhm.
Neptune and Saturn in Aries, and they are squaring the sun as it goes into Cancer. And so, what that might bring up is just a struggle around a way that you want to express yourself, that you want to, the fifth house where those are is your creative self expression. There's a little bit of a playful behavior here, there's some risk taking that might happen. And it's interesting because
Mhm.
you might not feel all that clear about that, but what you do know is it's coming at odds with whatever this shared resources are. I mean, it might be that you want to go off and do some wild creative project in this, and you're having monetary conversations with your partner and there's some conflict there. That would just be an example. Now, in the beginning of the season, that feels pretty stressful, probably. The way that you want to give of yourself is being challenged. But as the season goes on, as you've turned to face this, it promises to get easier. It promises to get more clear about how you want to handle all this, like how you want to think about it, and then how you want to involve your relationships and your partners in that conversation. It's just going to get easier. So, anyway, all right. Laurie, what do you have to add about this for
I
Sagittarius rising?
I love this one. This one is so clearly about relationships, that, and I want to remind people that on the 25th of June, you want to plant a seed there. That new moon on the 25th, Plant a seed for the nurturing growth of your ability to navigate other people's boundaries by, your ability to navigate other people's issues by setting boundaries, necessary boundaries. So you want to make sure you do that. Yeah, that struggle. I just imagine, all these little storylines come up. Like like you said, maybe there's some struggle with the money that you share with other people, and you want to do something extravagant. And you're just really adjusting to a lot of dynamic energy happening in that fifth house where Aries is. So you're really adjusting to a new way of expressing yourself. And that's what's coming into conflict with your ability to navigate other people's stuff. But nevertheless, Uranus moves into Gemini here this month, and that is going to wake you up to something crucially important that you probably weren't aware of around your particular partnership or what you need in partnership. Some way that partnership or your ideas of partnership is going to really be going through very big changes in the coming months and even years. We will be making a video very soon about Uranus moving into Gemini. Be sure that you're following this video. Be sure that you click on notifications so that you get that video when we release it, because you're really going to want to listen to that one.
Nice. All right.
All right,
Okay.
onward.
Capricorn rising.
Okay, so if you have Capricorn rising, I always love that people with Capricorn rising have Cancer in their seventh house. People with Capricorn rising are so, there's just this serious authority that they hold within their personality. And yet, in relationship, what they really need and desire and attract is this real tenderness. And this area of tenderness in partnership is what's being illuminated here at Cancer season. Now, as we begin this period of time, there's some stress. There's some stress on the relationship itself. There's some stress coming from the area of home and family. And you can imagine all the different ways that might be showing up. It could be a billion ways. It might be something about the house you live in. It might be something about the in-laws or, your family of origin. Whatever it is, there's some way in which your home and family, your relationship to that area is kind of has newly become a place of a lot of dynamic energy. You're really settling into a long process where your home and family is going to take on a lot more dynamic importance.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a struggle there between that adjustment and relationship. Now, on June 25th, we have the new moon. You want to really think about doing some sort of a ritual for that, planting a metaphorical seed for the growth of tenderness in your partnership, or, however you want to think about that. But do some sort of a ritual there. That struggle between home and relationship that starts the season. As the season goes along, and if you listen to the beginning of the video, you kind of can follow this better. But a lot of that's going to settle down and is really going to be supportive as the season moves along. And then there's the big wake-up call. And I'm going to let Jenny talk about the big wake-up call and whatever else she wants to add.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been really enjoying the sense of this flow with the season, just having this thing that feels kind of restrictive and stressful in the beginning, and then having that kind of turn into, wait a minute, like as you turn to look at it, as you work with it, as you know, respect that powerful activation, that you start seeing the opportunity in it. You start seeing how it's a source of flow and support, and that it's pretty exciting being activated, you know, and like it just to light up that way in this kind of fire way. So I think that, you know, as Lori's mentioned, as the season goes on, you'll as you embrace that, you can really start seeing how it becomes a source of strength, rather than a place to feel frustrated and bucking up against something. So that's kind of the flow of the season. And then Uranus going into Gemini is going to illuminate something for you about your daily routines. Now, this might sound boring, but I can assure you that daily routines are not boring because they really are where the magic happens. It's that every day, those things that you do, like the choices you make, how you're going to eat, how you're going to sleep, what, you know, whether you're going to exercise, who you're going to connect with. I mean, with Gemini there, you know, there's a social component. You know, there's a need to make connection as part of your daily routine. There's a need to stay in verbal contact with people as part of the things you do regularly. And so there's a big you know, illumination, or that's maybe not the right word, but a wake up, an awakening, like a hello to
Right.
some new way of handling that part of your life that I think can feel pretty exciting and different.
Yeah.
So yeah, look for
Yeah.
that.
That's really lovely to think about the wake up of your lifestyle choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be your diet or your exercise, so many different things. You might wake up to needing to bring a kitten home,
Yeah. It's
change
true
your
because
routine.
that's also the house of animals.
Yeah,
And that's a good
absolutely.
point because animals are so important. You know, whether it's pets in your home or animals you see in nature and you see how amazing they are. I like that you brought that up because I think, you know, that is part of it. And it's exciting to think about what that is. And we are going to make a video about that. So stay tuned for
Oh,
that.
yes, we're going to make a video about Uranus moving into Gemini. For a minute, I thought we were going to make a video about our pets. Oh, wouldn't that be fun? Okay,
All right, let's go on
hang
to,
on one second.
oh, all right. So if you have Aquarius rising, then this Cancer season is happening in your sixth house. So the sixth house is your daily routines, those day-to-day practices and habits and everything that makes up basically the fabric of your day. And with Cancer here, there's a real need to stay emotionally connected through these routines. So essentially, you want to choose things that support you emotionally. You want to choose things that intuitively feel right to you. You know, you want to choose things where you can find loving sensitivity and vulnerability with other people. You know, there's a very, I really actually like Cancer in the sixth house. It feels very nurturing and nourishing and just like that, you know, make sure that you stay hydrated. You know, make sure you connect with water quite regularly throughout this Cancer season. I think that's super important. And, you know, the beginning of the season, we have those kind of intense squares to Saturn and Neptune and Aries. So for you, it might be some tension around how you speak about what you need. You know, you might feel kind of aggravated and frustrated, yet feel sort of stymied about being able to speak about it. And really asking for what it is that you need is those daily routines. I mean, there's different ways it could play out, but there's some tension here between what you want to talk about and what your routines are. And
Mhm.
so that's, you know, really evident in the beginning of the season. As the season progresses, that pressure will likely feel less. It will start to feel more like a flow. You'll start to find, you know, that as you find your voice and you figure out what it is you need to say, it'll feel a bit more effortless to start speaking up about whatever's on your mind and being able to share that with people close to you.
Mhm.
So, what starts out as a bit of restriction actually becomes a support
Mhm.
as the time goes through, or as the sun moves through Cancer, essentially. So that's kind of the first piece of this. There is a Cancer new moon on June 25th. So you're going to want to make sure that at that time you really plant a seed for what kind of care you want to give to yourself, how you want to approach other people in a way that supports connection. So that's the first part of this. And Lori, what do you want to add about the other things happening this season?
Well, the only thing I'm going to add is we will be making a whole video about Uranus moving into Gemini, so be sure that you subscribe to our channel and click on receiving notifications because you're going to want to watch that, especially those of you with Aquarius rising. I just love this. Uranus is moving into your fifth house. What could be more fun than that, right? I mean, seriously, the fifth house is about how we give of ourselves. It's about creativity, about giving love. The old-time astrologers called it the house of children, love affairs, creativity. If you don't want children, make sure you're being careful because Uranus is always expect the unexpected. But this can really be a time when you might just really wake up to a much deeper understanding of how to play and how to have a good time. And that begins during this Cancer season. And it kind of brings all of this together because, if you're waking up to your creativity, it's certainly going to impact your voice and your day-to-day routines, right? I mean, these are all connected. And yeah, you're really, I just wanted to add, with that stress coming from the third house, it's really just about getting used to the strength of your voice, the strength and intuition that you need to bring to your voice.
Mm. Yeah, that's a nice combination of things. I really like that.
I do
Yeah, I think
too.
this is really spicing up your relationships. That's kind of what
Mm.
yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And your creativity is going to wake up in one way, whatever your creativity is. Creativity can mean a million different things,
yeah.
but
Okay.
really it's where you give of yourself. So yeah, let's move on to Pisces rising.
All right.
So, oh, nice. Oops. Is this mine or yours?
Oh, it's you. Yeah. No, you're up.
Okay.
You're up,
Okay.
baby.
I got confused there for a second. Okay, so if you have Pisces rising, Cancer season falls right in your fifth house. And I love this. Cancer comes along here, just summer begins. And for those of you with Pisces rising, this is really a time to focus on fun. The Cancer is held in your fifth house. Your fifth house is where you give most authentically of yourself. This is the house of creativity and of giving love. So
Mm,
that's where the focus is. You want to really think about how you fiercely give love, how you fiercely embrace your own vulnerability in how you give love, whether it's giving love to your children, to your lovers, or to your creative processes. This is a place where you give a lot of yourself. Um, so that's the focus. However, as we begin this season, there's a challenge to that. You are just in the process of adapting to some big changes in your own understanding of your values, of how you use your resources, how you understand your own self-worth. And there's some struggle. You're just kind of getting used to this. And there's some struggle, maybe the focus on creativity, you want to create something amazing and you have all the ideas for it, and yet your finances can't quite support that. That could be one of a lot of different ways this could play out. But as you work with that, you don't want to avoid it and just go, oh, well, I can't do this creative thing because I can't afford it. You want to look at it and say, okay, how can I work this? How can I make
mm,
these things work together? How can I support myself in making this creative process happen? On June 25th, we have a new moon, so you want to really take that opportunity to plant a metaphorical seed for the growth of your own emotional connection to your creative processes.
mm.
So as you work with this becomes easier and easier, and there becomes more of a flow as we move forward. Now, there's a few other things, but I'm going to let Jenny talk about
Yeah.
the last part.
I know. I'm just being really commenting. I'm just enjoying the shape of these seasons. Like the beginning of it is kind of challenging, but then as you turn to face the challenge, things that felt challenging then become an opportunity and just allow you to think about things in a new way. and allow you to connect with people intellectually in a new way, which is really helpful. And also the planet Uranus, which is the great awakener, it's kind of like the I like to think of it as the jackhammer that jackhammers up all the concrete so that new life can grow. So that energy is moving into your fourth house. So there's something new, there's some new phase of your life that's happening. It's moving into the fourth house of your foundation, or your home, your family life. So there's some kind of insight that's coming from that part of your life, that very private internal place, like your private home life. There's something very exciting that is being jazzed up or stimulated in some way, in a wholly new thing that's really getting your mind to think about things in a different way. So yeah, there's something about that. Wasn't very articulate, but but there's definitely some insight coming from the deepest reaches of your foundation and core self.
Yeah, and make sure if you're listening to this, make sure you subscribe to us and click on notifications because we will be making a video about Uranus moving into Gemini, and it's going to be very important to you. I love to think of Uranus as bringing excitement, and it can also bring a great deal of anxiety, but the job of Uranus is to wake us up. So
Yeah.
as Uranus moves in there, there is something you are waking up to about your core, about your roots, about your family, maybe your ancestry itself. That's a long process that just begins during this Cancer season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Nice.
excited.
Yeah. I know this is pretty cool. I mean, for those of you Pisces rising, this is a pretty dynamic kind of internal makeover. There's a lot of, pretty bold energy that's changing you on the inside, is what this suggests. So, yeah.
I
So,
can't wait to make that video about Uranus moving into Gemini. I'm really excited about that one.
I think we're all finished up here. So I'm going to stop sharing
I
and
think we are too. I think, thank you everyone for being here, for watching this video. And yeah, be sure to click on notifications because you're going to want to see that video about Uranus moving into Gemini.
nice. Yeah, thank you, Laurie, and thanks everybody.
Thank you. Take care.